Hello, horror fans. It's me, Kylie. And today it's just me. Cass will be back in a few weeks. But today we have on a very special guest. We have Jon Keeyes, the director of the new action thriller horror movie Speed Demon. How are you doing, Jon?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Super excited to have you on. This movie was just a blast, a wild ride, literally, full of great characters, terrifying evil, and some great humor. But for those of you who don't know, Speed Demon is about a priest, Father Novak, who was played by William H. Macy, and Sister Lou, played by Katie Cassidy. They board a train from Montreal to New York City, and they were not prepared for the danger and evil that were on that train. And after the train is taken over by the demon Asmodeus, they must battle possessed passengers on the train, and Sister Lou is forced to overcome her faltering faith and perform her first exorcism done by a nun, which is pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
I also want to let you know, when I first started watching this movie the other day, one of my youngest son's toys started going off for no reason. I'm like, well, this is perfect. This is perfect. But the batteries were dying. But yeah, it was scary, but it was perfect timing.
Good timing. I like to hear that.
Yeah. But it wouldn't be a Horrorcraft episode if we didn't ask, what is your favorite scary movie, Jon?
I've got multiples depending on the day you ask. I've always been a fan of John Carpenter's Halloween. I mean, that's my go-to every time. And then probably beyond that, it's American Werewolf in London, The Descent, Martyrs.
Oh, yes, The Descent. That is one of my favorite ones. My absolute favorite ones. Now,
it's so finely crafted.
It is. I hear they're doing a remake and they're doing like a gender swap. I kind of hope they don't do that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, I don't want to hear that. But Speed Demon, it mixes possession horror and like thriller, like action, like on a train. What inspired that combination?
So Domenico, who wrote the script, he came up with this entire actually franchise idea of Sister Lou and, performing exorcisms and battling demons. And he's got this incredible wit to him, and, a big brain imagination. And so when I got sent the script the first time I read it, and I didn't actually really know anything about it when the producer sent it to me, I knew it was Speed Demon and I knew it had to do with possession on a train, and that's it. And I read that script and I'm like, I've never seen a movie like this. I've got to be the one to direct this. I mean, you're right. It's speed, it's action on a train, it's a runaway train thriller, it's the ticking clock, it's possession, it's exorcism, it's demons, it's a little bit of everything, and it's fun. To me, it's a fun horror movie.
Absolutely. And I just really, my biggest highlight I feel from this movie is just the storytelling. Like with each characters, like I feel with each character, like you were rooting for all of them. Like you didn't want any of them to die. And we don't always get that in horror films. There's the trope of like certain characters, like you're glad that they're gone. But I just, I really enjoyed it. I feel I mostly gravitated towards Sister Lou's character. She is a complex character who has experienced some traumatic things in her life. She is also a nun who struggles with addiction. And I really resonated with her character because I lost my father in the same exact way as she lost her father. He took his life. And I am also a recovering addict as well. And I relapsed after having 2 or 3 years clean, about 9 months after his death. So I really resonated with her character. But going off of this, how important is it to you as a filmmaker to tell a story involving heavy themes like mental health and trauma?
That's really, particularly probably the second half of my career, that's mainly been my perspective. I'm also a recovering drug addict. I've been in recovery for a long time, and And I've dealt with, like so many people, I've dealt with the dark half, and the darkness that's uncontrollable inside you, and trying to learn how to find a peace with it and kind of, overcome
Yeah.
it and be healthy. And so a lot of my movies, I think that's a theme, not necessarily addiction, but that dark half is a theme in a
Yeah.
lot of my movies that characters have to deal with. So when I saw that in the script, in the original version of the script that I read, that was one of the things that I immediately latched onto. Because I mean, every, Sister Lou all the way across, every character in this movie is flawed. And every character has their sort of own inner demon that they're trying to deal with. Sister Lou's is the most obvious, of course. And so that became ultimately, I'm a genre director. I tend to direct either action or horror. But ultimately, it's about story and character for me first. And so when I saw all of these stories happening in the script, I was like, that's exactly what I want out of a movie.
Yeah, I really appreciated it. And like you said, with each character, like they all had their own kind of demons that they were battling on the inside. And it goes to show like you don't know what someone is battling on the inside, and just kind of just showing that kindness and loveness and compassion to people. My next question is, what made Katie Cassidy the right choice for Sister Lou?
So it was interesting. So when I got brought on, Katie was actually already involved in the project.
Okay.
But I didn't actually know that when I was given the script. I was already a fan of hers from Arrow, and such. And it was funny was I was reading the script without, like I said, literally knowing nothing. And once I read the script and I went back to the producers and I was like, okay, yes, I want to do it. Here's some thoughts that I'd like to incorporate into the script. And while reading it, I kept envisioning somebody in my mind as Sister Lou that was very, very close to Katie. And so when they told me that Katie was, kind of circling the project, involved in the project, I was like, okay, I've got to talk with her. And so we jumped on a Zoom, and we clicked immediately, connected immediately. And she's, she's got that action background because of the Arrow. She's got the genre background with Black Christmas and all of those other movies. And then
Yep.
she's kind of, just different things that she's dealt with in her life. Um, the character resonated with her as well, and some of the things that Lou. So, just in that first conversation with her and discussing the character and stories, we knew immediately that it was a click between both of us.
Absolutely. I feel like her playing Sister Lou, she just brought like that final girl role, and not like a traditional final girl that we usually see. Like she comes with some baggage, but she
Yeah,
comes out on top. You know what I mean? Now, William
absolutely.
H. Macy is such an unexpected casting choice for a horror film. And I was laughing. I've grown up watching a lot of his movies, but most notoriously Shameless, Frank Gallagher, and
Right.
seeing him, as almost like a judging, priest as Father Novak, it was hilarious to me. What did he bring to Father Novak as in a filmmaker's perspective?
I mean, he brought a humanity. I mean, ultimately, he
Yeah.
brought a humanity because I mean, obviously, Bill, I mean, he comes from, such a long history, the Mammoth School of Acting type of thing. And, he is fully invested in character and story. That's ultimately what he cares about. And it was funny when we approached Bill to do it, he read the script and he was at a point where he was no longer wanting to do things that kind of veered into violence, at least at that point. And apparently he read the script as he told me, and then he gave it to one of his kids, and they read the script, and they came back to him and like, you have to make this movie. It is such a cool, fun movie. And so that was what kind of convinced him to do it. And then it was our conversations. It was us. I told him, I said, same thing that we talked about. The character means everything to me, and in a way, Novak is her de facto father. And
Yeah.
she was basically raised by him within the church. And we got this dynamic. He was originally initially focusing on the possession exorcism. And I said, yes, obviously that's a very important part of the movie, but what's more important is this almost father-daughter relationship that deals with addiction and tough love.
Yeah.
And he's at
Yeah.
that point with the tough love in the movie. So that what we kind of talked through that that's what truly ended up engaging him was that relationship between the two of them. And he brought this beautiful humanity and this fatherly tough love that was necessary for the story.
Yeah, I felt it was a very accurate representation with a father and a daughter where your child is battling addiction. I don't feel like we often see it because I do feel sometimes in movies and shows it is glorified. And even just in real life, we see a lot of parents that are just they go through the enabling phase instead of just like that tough love. And I feel like that was just a very accurate representation of what that looks like.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it was interesting with Katie and I, when we were finding Katie's character and discovering that character, there's a scene in the movie between Sister Lou and Father Novak where she's talking about her addictions. And he's basically like, I'm the only person you have left, and I don't even know what to do anymore. And she's like, a, addiction, she's got that moment of clarity, but that moment of clarity is honest, but it's also a lie because she knows that she's going to fall back into it. And she ends up saying, sometimes I feel like I'm possessed. And that I actually wrote that scene. I talked to Dom about what was originally there, and I said, as a recovering drug addict, I'd really like to write the scene. And so we spent an entire day, Katie and I did, just delving into that scene and my own experiences, having said those things and believed those things and lied about those things,
Yeah.
and what that all meant. And so we created that scene as her anchor. And once she figured that out and got into it, she understood where that character is coming from and where that character is going to.
Yeah, I feel even with addiction and it before I got clean for the first time and realized like there was just this greatness of just like there was an answer to my problems that it was recovery, right? And so I just often felt just possessed, like and just like why am I doing these things? And we had a movie and we had the director on, Tim Shea, for a movie. Oh my gosh, it's slipping my mind. It's a really great film, but it's a lot about addiction and she gets possessed by something. Why can't I? Pieces of Amy. It's a great film. But it's kind of like that where she's using oxycontin but she becomes possessed by something, and it just was another very accurate representation.
That's beautiful. That's awesome.
Yes. Now, what kind of atmosphere did you want audiences to feel during Speed Demon?
So that's a funny question because we really spent a lot of time in pre-production, particularly when working on the script, figuring that part out. Dom's
Yeah.
original script, yeah, Dom's original script kind of really leaned into the absurdity of it. And I wanted to pull back, and I kind of went there first. I was like, okay, do we go the original Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, zany, campy type of route? And then I was like, no, that's, as much as I would love to do that, that's not me. And so then it was the pendulum swing. How dark do we go? No, don't want to go there because that doesn't make sense. So we just spent a lot of time finding, just kind of doing one of these numbers with the script until we settled in this happy medium of, what my director of photography, Austin, we've done so many movies together. And one of his first questions was, what's your intention with this movie? And we had hit that point in the pendulum swing where I was like, my intention is that on Saturday night, I want a group of friends to all get together with a bowl of popcorn and enjoy watching a movie. And he's like, okay, I understand the tone of this movie now. And that's really what I ended up wanting it to be, was just a fun, enjoyable, entertaining movie with people that you care about.
Absolutely. I feel like this is something that like high school kids are going to sit down and watch with all of their friends. I mean, it's just you got a little bit of everything. Action, thriller, horror. There's something for everybody in this movie. So I love it. I love it so much. Is there any hidden details or Easter eggs like horror fans should watch for?
No, I've done that before in my other horror movies, and I decided I didn't want to do that in this one. So I didn't do any Easter eggs. I didn't hide anything in there. There's obviously, there's moments of homage in there. Hitchcock's The Birds, and some things like
Yeah.
that. There's some obvious nods in there, but yeah, Easter egg wise, no. I went straight with the script.
I didn't think so, but I wanted to ask because I didn't catch anything either. While as a horror fan, I enjoy that sometimes. but I do feel some people can get kind of carried away with that and just not really making it kind of like their own movie. And that's what you guys have done here with Speed Demon. But
Yeah,
I
and
do
that's
have,
what, I was just gonna
go
say,
ahead.
Dom's original script did have some very obvious Easter eggs in it, and that was part of what we decided, and we talked to talk together. I was like, I want to make my movie. I've got movies that I've done that are nods and homages and have all of those kind of things in it. I was like, I just want this one to be my movie, and he was like, he fully
Yeah.
supported that. So yeah, that's what we did.
Well, there's not really a lot of horror movies where nuns are performing exorcisms. The only one that I know, and I've kind of seen some of it, is Prey. But I like that. I think that's just a completely different take on possession type of horror films, that that subgenre. And Sister Lou was just a badass in this movie. She really was.
Yeah, and that
But
was something that was so important to Katie and I. Yeah.
yeah, she was a strong woman. And I do feel sometimes, even with like the final girl trope we fall into, where they're just kind of in the beginning just not very, they don't have like that final girl oomph. But Kate really
Right.
had it the whole time. She had it in her the whole time, and watching her harness that and get to the end was beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, you've worked in action, thriller, horror genres throughout your career. What keeps pulling you towards going back to more darker stories?
Um, I think I mean, part of it is it's the cathartic nature of it, and my own exploration of, like we were talking about it, that dark self, the whole Jungian theory. Um, and then just within the genre films, action and horror, I find them to be incredibly creative and imaginative. I love to tell good stories. I'd love to do a drama, I'd love to do a period piece, all those kind of things. But what keeps drawing me back to these is the characters exploring that dark self, and then just the imagination and creativity that you can have with a genre film. It's fun. I mean, it's people joke, people that don't know the movie business, they're like, it's got to be scary being on set. And I'm like, a horror movie is the most fun you will ever have on a movie set, because we're all just kids in a candy store playing.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot from a lot of different actors and filmmakers, that it's just so fun to be a part of making a horror film, especially if you're using like practical effects, you've got fake blood, you know. Um, Maybe one day I will have an opportunity to do something cool like that. Now, what scares you personally as a filmmaker?
What scares me personally? Interesting. Honestly, it's probably actually letting people down. It's important to me, and I didn't come from a background where I ever intended to be a filmmaker. That was never. I didn't go to film school. I didn't make short films. That was never something that was on my radar. I fell into it late in my 20s by accident and just completely it fell in love with it, and was like, this is the only thing I can ever do. But so many people, I was a journalist before that. I'd interviewed tons of directors, and I'd spent time on lots of big studio movie sets and things like that as a journalist. And it just, in some of those people that I talked to, I remember them talking about the analogy of, the director is the captain of the ship, and your energy and your personality and, your support is and gratitude is what's going to make that entire crew and the cast all support the movie and kind of come along with that. And so I took that to heart. And so, I never want to be the director that shows up and isn't prepared. I never want to be the director that doesn't have an answer. I always want to be there for everybody who's on that set. So I never want to let them down.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful how you put that. I feel like it's a lot of pressure being a filmmaker, especially now with just how movies are made, what people like, what people don't like. And I often feel a lot of times, even with the bigger studio films, we're not seeing a lot of original just storytelling. We're not really, and it doesn't always have to be like that in movies, but I like being able to be engaged with the character and the stories and just things matching and aligning. I like rooting for the character. There are some films where you're just like I said before, you don't really care what happens to the characters. But And, everybody's a critic. It's part of what me and Cass do. We talk about movies, we review them. But I think we have to remember that there are people, real actual people that make these movies, that put their hearts and souls into making them and acting in them. And we got to be nice, guys. We got to be nice. Okay.
Yep. That's something we've all experienced for sure.
Yes. Now, if you could remake any horror movie from the past, which one would you choose and why?
So that's how I've been asked that a handful of times, and it's always so unexpected is in my answer. And it's not truly a horror movie, but it's something wicked this way comes.
Yes.
That movie, Bradbury's story, and that original movie with Jason Momoa. I mean, that was just such a magical movie to me. And as a young boy watching it, was a very frightening movie because of the subject matter and the content of what's going on with Mr. Dark and all of that. And then just having grown up with it and being in love with it, and then reading Bradbury's stories and book and all of that, I've always been enamored with the idea, particularly with the technology where we're at now, what we could do with what was in his stories. That's the movie I would love to make.
Yeah, I'd like to see you make that. Yeah. Let's call Jon. Let's get him on it. What is one horror movie you think deserves more love than it gets from fans?
Ooh. That's a tough one. I'm not really sure. If I think about all of the ones that I really love, Martyrs is a very difficult movie. I mean, I think, when it came out, and it came out in that period when all of the French horror movies were kind of coming out and such. And I think there were people that really there were genre people that really liked the movie, but I feel like a lot of them, when I've talked to them, it was about the violence. It was about the effects of what was going on. And what got me about it was obviously the story, the characters, and what was happening, and the twists on what was happening. I remember the first time I watched it and I got to the end, I was so in shock and so overwhelmed with what the story actually was that I remember just sitting there kind of in silence for like 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm like, I've got to watch this movie again. This is such a deep movie that I need to go back and watch this again. And I've done that a lot of times. And I think that even though it is considered, a well-made horror movie, I don't think it's one that gets enough attention for the actual story that's being told within that. And the performances are outstanding.
That is one I have not seen, but I have heard a lot about and have been cautioned about. I always have a list of stuff I have to watch.
It's always a difficult movie to watch.
Yeah, but sometimes I do know it does have like a lot of like real life trauma themes, and really that's what horror is about. To being able to talk about real life horror and in different ways, and it's conveyed in different ways. And I think people sometimes forget, like, sometimes these things really do happen to people. And by making these movies, we bring awareness to things.
Yep. Nope. Exactly.
So for people discovering your work through Speed Demon, which of your previous films should they check out next? I did watch Guns Up. That was pretty good.
Thank you. That was a really fun one. Of the ones that I've directed, Cult Killer, Antonio Banderas and Alice Eve, I particularly love that one. There's an art house horror movie that I did. It takes place entirely in one room with a lot of subtext story and horror happening in it, called Doom Room. And then still an all-time favorite of mine is my very first movie, American Nightmare. I mean, that movie has maintained itself for 25 years, never been out of distribution, just got an anniversary collector's edition Blu-ray. It's a fun one, and people still seem to enjoy it. It keeps selling year after year after year.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm gonna add those to my list as well. I meant to watch The Cult Killer, but children.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
yeah. Now, finally, what can horror fans expect when they board the train for Speed Demon?
They can expect a high adrenaline film that that's going to entertain them. I think that's what I kind of I was doing some interviews at the premiere, and we just kind of got into going, you know what? It's a nerdy horror movie. It's a horror movie for nerds and dorks, which I am one of those. I am that
Same.
person, and yeah, and it's got all of the ridiculous things, and it's got some of the campy humor that's missing from those movies now, and it's got
Yep.
action, and it's got horror, and it's got fireflies, and it's got demons, and a little bit of everything. This is like, it's a big melting pot of, hey, go have fun and enjoy yourself for an hour and a half.
Yeah, the Fireflies threw me off, but turned into something absolutely just diabolical. But I love Speed Demon. Thank you so much for coming on. And everyone, go see Speed Demon. It will be in select theaters May 31st and will be on digital VOD the same day as well. But until next time, it's me, Kylie, and Jon. And stay weird and stay spooky. Bye, guys.